The tavern was never silent. Even in the hours between dusk and dawn, when most patrons had staggered home or collapsed under their tables, there was always some murmur, a snore, a half-finished song slurred into the rafters, the creak of the old timbers that held the place together. For those who worked there, the tavern was not just a place of business. It was a world within a world, where secrets traded hands as often as coin, and the smell of smoke, ale, and sweat clung like perfume. Among those who had once walked its floor, tankards in hand and laughter at the ready, was a barmaid named Alenya. To most who knew her, she was quick-witted, sharper than the average serving girl, with a way of slipping through quarrels and chaos like water finding its course. Few noticed how she always seemed to move at just the right time, stepping aside before a stool was toppled, ducking under a drunken swing as if she had read her assailant's mind, or catching a pitcher before it fell to the floor. Those who did notice dismissed it as luck, but it was not luck. From the age of 12, Alenya had been cursed, or blessed, depending on the hour, with the ability to see what others could not. A handful of seconds into the future. No grand visions, no prophecies of kingdoms rising and falling. Just the moments directly ahead, slipping before her eyes like a trick of light. She had learned early to hide it, to wear her secret like a second skin. After all, no one trusted a girl who always seemed to know what was coming. The tavern had been her stage. She had worked there alongside the keeper himself when she was barely more than a child, carrying trays, sweeping floors, listening to stories told by weathered sailors, deserters, nobles in disguise, and mercenaries who smelled of blood. It was there she learned to hone her sight, turning her visions into reflexes so smooth that none suspected. But secrets have a way of catching fire. The night it began, the tavern was full to bursting. A storm had driven merchants and travelers off the road and into the warmth of the hearth. The air was thick with smoke and chatter, the kind of noise that blurred into one great hum. Alenya moved among them, skirts swaying, tray balanced in one hand. She saw it before it happened, a nobleman's jeweled dagger sliding free from his cloak, a thief's hand darting for it, the scuffle, the inevitable brawl. In her mind's eye, she watched the next 10 seconds unfold, saw the dagger's edge flash, saw blood spill across the floorboards. When she blinked, the vision snapped back. She was in the present again, breath caught in her chest. Instinct guided her. She shifted course, bumping into the thief just as his hand reached for the dagger. The tray tipped, ale splashed, and laughter erupted from the nearby patrons. What no one noticed was how the noble's dagger remained safely tucked in its sheath, the spark of bloodshed extinguished before it was born. Alenya's heart pounded. She told herself it was nothing new. She had done this 100 times. Averted fights, stopped accidents, smoothed over the tavern's chaos before it ever reached a head. But that night there had been eyes watching her. A man in a dark cloak, face hidden in shadow, leaned against the far wall. He had not laughed with the others. He had not looked away when the tray spilled. His gaze was fixed on Alenya, sharp as a knife point, and in that instant she knew her secret was no longer hers alone. Alenya tried to shake it off. Patrons stared all the time, merchants with too much wine in them, farmhands with little sense, the occasional nobleman who thought his coin could buy anything. But the man in the corner did not drink. nor did his eyes waver. They clung to her like hooks. When her shift ended, she carried her empty tray back to the kitchens, where the keeper himself was scolding a boy for burning the stew. Alenia slipped past quietly, untying her apron, her thoughts restless. That night, as she washed her hands in the basin and checked her reflection in the cracked mirror above it, the vision came unbidden. She saw herself step into the alley behind the tavern, heard the crunch of boots on wet stone, felt a hand close around her arm. The breath caught in her throat. When the vision blinked away, she lingered, heart thundering. She could leave through the front, stay with the other girls, pretend she had not seen. But she had learned long ago that her glimpses of the future were never wrong. And so she did the only thing she could. She prepared. She tucked a dull kitchen knife into her sleeve and stepped out the back door, as she had seen. The rain had softened to a drizzle, the alley narrow and dark. For a heartbeat, she thought perhaps she had been wrong, until the boots came just as they had in the vision. The man from the tavern's corner stepped into the light of the lantern. His hood was drawn back now, revealing a long, angular face, pale as parchment. His eyes were dark, too dark, and they gleamed with something colder than curiosity. "You are quick with your hands," he said softly. "Too quick for chance." Alenia said nothing. Her fingers twitched near her sleeve. "I have seen such gifts before," the man went on. "Rare, dangerous. You should not waste them pouring ale for drunkards." "I don't know what you mean," Alenia said, forcing her voice steady. The man smiled, though it never touched his eyes. "You will, in time. For now, consider this a courtesy." He drew a coin from his cloak, silver stamped with the crest of the king's hand, and pressed it into her palm before she could refuse. "There are those who would kill for what you can do, and those who would chain you." She opened her mouth to speak, but the man was already gone, his cloak vanishing into the rain. The coin gleamed in her hand like a brand. That night she did not sleep. The weeks that followed blurred into unease. Alenia worked her shifts, smiled at the patrons, laughed at their jokes. But the visions came sharper more often, flashes of daggers unsheathed, of whispered words that would lead to betrayals, of faces twisted in anger that had not yet come. And always she felt the weight of the coin in her pocket, heavy as guilt. One evening, a brawl broke out between two soldiers. Alenia saw it before it began. The shove, the crack of fist on jaw, the smashed bottle. She slid between them, a laugh on her lips, turning their anger into embarrassment. The tavern roared with amusement, but when she glanced to the door, she saw him, the man in the cloak, watching again. Only this time he was not alone. Behind him stood two armored figures, the king's crest glinting on their pauldrons. Their eyes scanned the crowd like hunters tracking prey. Alenia's blood went cold. She knew then what the man had meant. She had been noticed, and soon she would no longer have the choice to hide. The tavern was alive that night with music and firelight, the kind of warmth that drew travelers in from the rain-slicked streets. But Alenia felt none of it. The moment she had seen the armored men by the door, her stomach twisted tight. She kept her smile painted on, weaving between tables with her tray, though every step felt like treading across a frozen lake, waiting for it to crack. The cloaked man had seated himself in the shadows, watching her with calm patience, while the soldiers kept near the doorway, eyes roving. Her visions teased at her, flashes like candlelight in a storm, a hand gripping her wrist, a shout, a blade drawn. She forced them back, but the edges of the future pressed close, sharp and insistent. Then it happened. A drunken nobleman, red-cheeked and stumbling, caught her by the waist as she passed. His laughter reeked of sour wine. "Sweet girl," he slurred, tugging her too close. "Leave these mugs and come warm my bed." Alenia felt the vision break open before her. She saw the nobleman strike the soldier's shoulder with his flailing arm, saw the soldier mistake it for insult, saw his sword half drawn before sense could stop him. The room would turn to chaos, steel flashing, blood spilled on the floor. Without thinking, Alenia moved. She seized the nobleman's arm, twisting him just enough that his stumble carried him past the soldier instead of into him. In the same motion, she spun the tray, letting the mugs clatter loudly across the table, turning heads, drowning the soldier's half-formed anger beneath sudden laughter. The moment passed like a shadow, the danger gone before anyone else had noticed it. But one man had noticed. The cloaked stranger's gaze locked with hers, sharper than a blade. And Alenia knew as surely as she knew her own heartbeat that she had revealed herself. She tried to flee. When her shift ended, she made for the back door, but the soldiers were waiting in the alley. Their armor gleamed faintly in the lamplight, their hands resting near their blades. "The king's hand summons you," one said flatly. Alenia's breath came shallow. She tried to think, to twist the vision that hovered at the edge of her mind into something she could use. But the future was merciless. She saw herself run. She saw the soldier's hand catch her arm. She saw herself dragged through the mud like a dog on a chain. Her knife was still hidden in her sleeve, but steel against armored men, she might as well throw it in the gutter. And then, another flicker of sight, the soldiers lunging, the clatter of barrels as a stray dog darted between them, the crash of wood, a space opening, just enough for her to slip through. Her eyes widened, and when the moment came, she moved. The dog barked, the barrels tumbled, and Alenia sprinted into the night, heart hammering. Shouts rose behind her. "Stop her! Don't let her escape!" But her legs flew, guided by glimpses of cobblestones and corners, before she even reached them. She twisted through the rain-slick streets, like water slipping between cracks, until the shouts grew faint. At last, breathless and soaked, she collapsed against a wall beneath the eaves of a shuttered shop. Her body shook with cold and fear, but inside a fire burned. They would not stop hunting her, not now. The king's hand wanted her, and if she did not disappear, they would have her. By dawn, she was gone from the tavern. The keeper found her apron folded neatly on the counter, the silver coin of the king's hand pressed atop it. No note, no explanation, only the faintest trace of her perfume lingering in the air. He said nothing of it to the others. But when the soldiers returned to question him, he lied with the ease of a man who had learned long ago that sometimes silence kept folk alive. And so Alenia vanished. But her name, her story, had only just begun. Alenia left the city before the sun had fully broken the horizon. The cobbled streets gave way to dirt paths lined with hedgerows, and the shouts of market criers were replaced by the stillness of the open countryside. Every step carried her farther from the tavern she had called home, farther from the laughter and warmth she once knew. but she could not afford grief. Not now. The visions pressed against her mind with every heartbeat. She saw forks in the road, saw pursuers riding hard, saw herself captured if she lingered too long in one place. They were not always clear, not always certain, but they were enough to keep her just a half step ahead of fate's jaws. Her first days on the road were bitter. The skies broke with relentless rain, soaking her cloak until it clung heavy on her shoulders. She had no horse, no coin, save for a few pilfered coppers hidden in her boot, and no company but the flickering shadows her visions provided. She slept in barns when she could, in ditches when she could not. Hunger gnawed her belly until her thoughts blurred. Yet even in the worst of it, her gift saved her. Once she dreamed of waking with a blade at her throat. She startled awake in time to hear a thief creeping toward her camp, knife glinting. She fled into the trees before he was close enough to strike. Another time she foresaw the crumbling of a bridge beneath her boots. She tested the planks before crossing, only to watch them give way and crash into the churning river below. Every day was survival, and every survival was owed to those fleeting seconds of foresight. But the king's hand was not idle. She saw signs of the hunt everywhere, soldiers in villages asking questions, sketches of her face nailed to posts, marked with the seal of the crown, a barmaid with dark hair and quick eyes, accused of sorcery, of crimes against the realm. Her throat tightened every time she saw her likeness, distorted though the charcoal drawings were. They had twisted her into a villain, a witch who bewitched noblemen, a traitor who sought to poison the king's court. Lies, but lies carry weight when pressed into parchment and stamped with the king's seal. And so she kept to shadows. She moved by night, slipping through farms and small holdings, taking scraps where she could. She spoke to no one, for even a single kind word might draw the wrong ear. Weeks passed this way until hunger drove her to risk the open road. She followed a caravan of traders for a day, staying just close enough to catch the smell of their cooking fires. That night, when they stopped at a crossroads inn, she lingered outside the firelight, shivering and torn. A vision stirred. She saw herself approach, saw a trader's hand reach for her shoulder, saw bread pressed into her hand, saw no steel, no betrayal. She forced herself forward. The traders were rough folk, but not unkind. One, a broad-shouldered woman with soot on her cheek, eyed her with suspicion. "You look half-starved," she said. "I've, been walking a long time," Alenya murmured. "Sit, eat," the woman replied, pushing a crust of bread into her hands. For a brief, flickering night, Alenya remembered the taste of kindness. But kindness carries risk. The following morning, as the caravan prepared to move, one of the younger men whispered too loudly, "She looks like the girl on the posters." The moment those words reached her ears, the vision struck like lightning. Soldiers on horseback, pounding hooves, shouts of pursuit. Her body moved before her mind had caught up. She bolted from the camp, darting through hedges and into the woods. Behind her, voices rose in alarm, confusion, anger. And then, the dreaded sound of hooves. They had found her again. She ran until her lungs burned, the trees clawing at her cloak, the ground slick beneath her boots. Her visions flickered faster than ever, a root to trip her, a branch to cut her cheek, the glint of a spear tip flashing past her ear. She dodged, twisted, wove between the threads of death by the barest margins. But she could not run forever. She stumbled into a clearing where the trees broke into a sheer cliff. The forest fell away below, a river roaring far beneath. The soldiers burst from the undergrowth behind her, steel drawn, faces set like stone. She saw herself leap, saw the water close around her like a coffin, saw herself wash up days later, battered but alive. She saw herself surrender, saw chains, saw fire, saw the king's hand watching with eyes like ice. There was no choice. Alenia drew a breath, whispered a prayer to no god in particular, and leapt into the abyss. The wind tore the scream from her throat. The world spun, and then the river struck, cold and merciless. Darkness swallowed her. The river spat her out like broken driftwood. Alenia awoke on the bank, lungs burning, throat raw from coughing water. Her cloak was gone, torn away by the current, and her body was a patchwork of bruises. For a long while she lay there, trembling, unsure if she had truly survived or if she still drowned in some dream. But she was alive. Against all odds, she had slipped free of the king's hunters again. The wilderness claimed her for many days. She walked barefoot when her boots tore apart, wrapped herself in reeds when the nights grew cold. Hunger gnawed more fiercely than ever, and visions came to her with feverish clarity, a rabbit darting from a thicket before it moved, berries hidden beneath a patch of bramble, a storm breaking an hour before it struck. The gift sustained her, yet it also weighed heavier. More than once she saw not just what was to come, but what might come. Futures branching like cracks in glass. In one she starved, in another she found firewood, in yet another she stumbled upon soldiers too soon. She lived in a constant blur of choice, every action carved from 1,000 half-seen possibilities. Each night she whispered to herself, just one more day, just one more step. One evening, stumbling near collapse, she reached a hamlet so small it barely deserved a name. A handful of cottages huddled around a crooked church, smoke rising from stone chimneys. The visions flared. She saw herself knocking on a door, saw a woman frown at her muddy state, saw bread offered, saw a warning, a whisper that soldiers had passed through only days before. Her legs nearly gave out from relief. She followed the vision. The cottage belonged to a widow named Mirella, her hair silvered, her eyes soft with pity. "You're hunted, aren't you?" she asked, voice low as she pressed bread into Alenia's hands. Alenia froze. "Why do you say that?" "Because only the hunted look behind them that often." Mirella asked no further questions. She gave her shelter in the barn, water to wash with, and old clothes that smelled of lavender. For the first time in months, Alenia slept without the taste of fear on her tongue. She stayed in the hamlet for some days, hidden half-ghost among the villagers. She dared not speak too freely, but the people, weary, poor, and far from the king's court, did not pry. Here she began to see a different kind of future. Not the panicked flashes of pursuit, but the fragile possibility of belonging. She helped tend Mirella's goats, carried water from the stream, mended clothes with clumsy stitches. At night she told stories to the widow's grandchildren, spinning old tavern tales until they fell asleep, smiling. For a moment she allowed herself to imagine a life, but the visions would not let her rest. She saw flames, soldiers burning the hamlet in search of her. She saw Mirella struck down for offering kindness. She saw children crying amid the ashes. She could not stay. To remain was to curse them. And so, one dawn before the sun rose, she left with nothing but the widow's blessing and a bundle of bread. She wandered northward into lands of rolling hills and forgotten ruins where whispers of rebellion drifted like smoke. In lonely inns and half-abandoned farms, she began to hear of those who resisted the crown, outlaws, broken knights, and common folk who dreamed of freedom. Her visions turned toward them. She saw herself meeting a man with a scar across his cheek, saw herself warning him of a trap, saw lives spared, blades turned aside, ambushes undone before they began. Her gift was no longer only for survival. It was becoming something greater. And though she did not yet know it, the hunted barmaid was walking toward a destiny far larger than the tavern walls she had once called home. The scarred man was waiting exactly where she knew he would be. A ruined watchtower stood alone on a ridge, its stones cracked, its stairwell collapsed to rubble. Alenia had seen it in her visions for days, a place of meeting, though she hadn't known with whom. She approached cautiously, cloak drawn tight, eyes scanning the horizon. He stepped from the shadows of the ruin. Tall, broad-shouldered, his face lined with hardship, a jagged scar crossed his cheek, down to his jaw. His hand rested on the hilt of a blade that looked well-worn, as though it had seen too many wars. "You've been following me," he said. "No," Alenia replied softly. "I've been waiting." His eyes narrowed. "Who sent you?" "No one." She hesitated. "I came because I think you need me." The man's name was Kaelin, once a captain in the king's army, now an outlaw, branded traitor. He led a small band of rebels who hid in the hills, striking at patrols and vanishing before the soldiers could retaliate. At first, Kaelin mistrusted her. He saw a ragged woman, dirt-stained and thin, with no sword at her side. "You'll slow us down," he told her when she begged to stay. But Alenia saw what was coming. When Kaelin's men planned an ambush along the northern road, she begged them to wait. She knew. She had seen that a second column of soldiers was due to march that way. "If you strike now, you'll all die," she whispered. Kaelin's men scoffed, but he paused. There was something in her eyes, the weight of certainty that only battle-hardened men carried. He called off the ambush. Hours later, scouts returned pale-faced. 2 full columns had marched, twice the number expected. The rebels would have been crushed. After that, Kaelin began to listen. Her gift became their shield. When the rebels set camp, she warned of a raid before the torches ever touched the trees. When they rode to free prisoners from a roadside gallows, she guided them by seconds. A soldier raising a horn cut down before sound escaped. A crossbow loosed a heartbeat too late. To the men it seemed sorcery. They called her Witch of the Split Second, the Widow's Prophet, even the Ghost of the Tavern. They whispered of her power, though none dared ask how she did it. But to Alenia it was both salvation and curse. Every glimpse of the future was a burden. Every spared life was a weight she carried. She could never rest, always eyes straining forward, always listening to the next echo of what was to come. Word of her spread faster than she imagined. Villages that once hid their bread for fear of soldiers now offered it to her freely. Old men bowed, mothers pressed children to her skirts, thanking her as though she were a saint. The rebels themselves began to believe they could not be beaten, not so long as Alenia guided them. And yet she knew better. For with every victory, the visions grew darker. She saw betrayals, she saw blood, She saw her face reflected in water, streaked with tears, as smoke rose behind her. Fate was no straight road. It forked and split, and she walked it like a tightrope, always one slip from disaster. One night, Kaelin confronted her by the fire. "What are you, really?" he asked, eyes hard. "You see things no one should see. You've saved us more times than chance allows. Tell me the truth." Alenya stared into the flames, her hands trembling. "I was nothing," she whispered. "A barmaid in a tavern by the river. I scrubbed mugs and sang for drunks. And then, one day I knew a fight would start before it began. I knew which way a cup would fall before it tipped. I've been running from it ever since." Kaelin studied her, the firelight sharpening his scar. "And now?" She looked up at him, her voice steady despite the dread curling in her chest. "Now I think I was meant to find you." The rebels grew lean in those hard months. Food was short. The king's patrols prowled the hills, and suspicion gnawed even at their campfires. Alenya, though accepted by most, felt the weight of every glance that lingered too long. Some adored her gift, others feared it. But all of them, she knew, were waiting to see whether she would stand with them when the storm broke. The storm did not delay. On a night thick with rain, she woke with her heart hammering, her sight already flaring before her mind had caught up. She saw soldiers, royal men in dark cloaks, moving silently through the forest paths, torches wrapped in cloth to dim their glow. She saw blades drawn, dogs on leashes, and a man she remembered from the tavern long ago, the captain who once asked her if she could see truth in a glass. His face returned in her vision, sharpened by the future's cruel light. "They're coming," she whispered, and before the words finished, she was shaking the rebels awake. Brenor, his grizzled face calm even in panic, listened as she described every detail. "How many minutes?" he asked. "Not minutes," she said. "Seconds. They're almost here." The camp scattered into motion, bowstrings drawn, knives unsheathed, gear packed in frantic haste. Yet Alenya knew, as surely as she had ever known, that not all of them would leave the forest alive. Her gift showed her glimpses of what lay ahead. Blood on leaves, a torch dropped in mud, Brenor's sword clashing against the captain's blade, and herself standing alone at a crossroads she could not yet see past. The king's men came like wolves. The forest burst with shouting, steel ringing, dogs barking savage and wild. Alenya dodged through it, pulling a wounded boy out of harm's path, her sight flickering faster than her breath could keep up. She moved left when an arrow cut through air, dropped when a sword flashed, dragged others into cover seconds before spears struck where they had stood. But the visions drained her. Each one left her hollow, a step behind in her own body. Her gift was fire, and fire always consumed. At the battle's height, she saw Brenor locked against the captain. She rushed forward, knowing only that something in that clash would decide the night. Her sight tore open again, and she saw two endings. One where Brenor fell, his head severed, and one where the captain faltered, leaving the king's men broken. And in the middle of those visions, herself. The choice was hers. Step one way and Brenor would win, though she would fall with an arrow through her heart. Step the other and Brenor would die, the rebellion without its leader. But she herself would live to carry whispers into the dark. The seconds hung heavy, the world moving slow. She tasted rain, blood, the smoke of torches. She thought of the tavern's hearth, of laughter rising over mugs of ale, of the life she had wanted when the world was simpler. Then she moved. No one but she would ever know the choice she made. The stories would differ. Some would say the rebels lived because she sacrificed herself. Others that the rebellion endured because she chose survival over loyalty. What is true is this. The king's soldiers were broken that night, scattered into the forest. The rebellion lived on, though leaderless, bound together by the tale of the barmaid who could see ahead. Some claimed she died with Brenor, arrow in her chest, whispering his name. Others swore she slipped away in the chaos, her face last seen in the torchlight, before vanishing into legend. And me? I only tell you what I was told, that in some tavern far from here, a woman sits in the corner where shadows keep their secrets, her eyes always a fraction ahead of the moment, watching futures fall like rain. If you ever catch her gaze, remember this. She has already seen the shape of your next breath, and she knows whether you will live long enough to take it.